Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is the second webinar in a series of webinars that are being hosted by Impact Signal. Thank you very much for joining us today. The topic for the webinar today is best practices for human AI interaction design. And I'm going to be your speaker for today. My name is Everton Lewis. I'm a consultant. My area of expertise is product and service design. So I spent a few years, almost 20 years in this area. And the reason why I do it is because I've seen the impact of taking a very human-centered approach on the building of enterprise services, enterprise products. And for me, there's tools and techniques that can be really impactful for organizations when they use it well. And I like to share that knowledge that I have with different organizations to help them, execute and do that. And today, our topic is, again, best practices with human AI interaction. And I put up this slide just to get us started because I felt like, this is something where there's just so much time and attention being put on ChatGPT. So, have you heard that AI is the future? And if you haven't, then you probably are not paying attention to what's going on right now because so many people are talking about ChatGPT and AI and what potentially that can do for the future. And a lot of organizations now are starting to think even more about how they can incorporate these tools and technologies into their business processes and their business flow. And that's where we really want to start to think about those best practices, right, for human AI interaction. And as we start to think about AI in the future, it's really important for us to just level set around, what do we consider to be AI? So from my perspective, as I put down a definition of what is AI, AI is a computer system that performs tasks that usually require human intelligence. And there's things that they're problems or scenarios or situations that are particularly suited to AI. So some of the things we talk about is just, recognition of things, autonomous systems, thinking about patterns and anomalies, right? Recognizing different patterns and anomalies, as well as personalization. So really using information, gathering a bunch of data to create personalized environments and situations. And then as well, we can think about conversation and human interaction. And that's really where we're starting to get into the things that ChatGPT is doing. And for me, what I think has really made things really different for ChatGPT is just the interface. It's been really simple to use, just a few words can create these powerful outputs. And the technology behind ChatGPT has actually been around for a while. But that interface and just being easily accessible, being able to, again, just use simple commands and get these powerful outputs, I think that that's the thing that's been different and has really, captured the imagination of a lot of people outside of the tech world. And, I went down not too long ago to South by Southwest, and it was interesting to see just how much time and attention was being put in that tech environment to ChatGPT and generated AI and what potentially that's going to do now that we have, example of, of just a product that has been able to really generate such a large user base in such a short period of time. So, so I think this is something that's capturing the tech world, it's capturing the business world, it's capturing just the general population around just starting to think about, what is possible, what can happen in the future. And as we start to think about what's possible and what can happen in the future, we've also now started to, hear people talk about some of the negative potential for the future. How could this be abused? How could it be misused? What headlines do we need to worry about seeing with a system like ChatGPT as we start to move forward in the future? And I think there's always an opportunity to learn from the past as we start to think about the future. So I want to share a couple of things that have, AI and users failures in the past, and then we can start to think about that. And then we can start to, again, think about how we can incorporate some best practices to make things or to help steer things as we go forward. So past failed AI and users. So here's an example. This is a headline that was pulled from the Washington Post. Dear tech companies, I don't want to see pregnancy ads after my child was stillborn. Yeah. You can imagine how this would make someone feel. And you can imagine how this would be a negative headline and a negative impact for a company. Another headline pulled from The Atlantic: ruthless quotas at Amazon are maiming employees. This holiday season, Amazon will move millions of packages at dizzying speed. Internal injury reports suggest all that convenience is coming at the expense of worker safety. So this is something, again, that wasn't necessarily considered fully. And now we've got this headline around what these quotas are doing to the actual employees and how these injuries are taking place. And it's my opinion that taking a more human-centered design approach can correct some of these mistakes before they become a headline. And that's where we have the opportunity to actually use some of what I'm going to share with you today to be helpful. So as we go forward, what I want to do is I want to use a case example so that we can ground these best practices in a real world example so you can see how they're applied. Because it's one thing for us to just conceptually talk about what these best practices may be, but I think it's a lot better for us to actually see how they're applied. And I'm going to take a case example from the world. Now, this case example is something that's public, it's out there, it's on the internet. It was work that was done several years ago, and I can share quite a few details related to it. So we can share some of the images, we can share some other details that I think are helpful so that you can actually see how, they're actually, how the best practices exist in the real world. So the example: how might we incorporate an analytics-driven recommendation engine into online cell phone renewal experience? And the background here is that, again, it was a few years ago, but a competitive market with constantly changing plans and service offers. It's very confusing for customers to know the best plan based on their behaviors. And so ideally what we want to do is we want to create an experience where they can get a recommendation of what's best for them based on their historical actual behavior, not just based on someone who's general, but actually based on what they do and how they use their phones. And then the next piece here is that a desired business outcome is for increased revenues as well as increased customer satisfaction. So anytime we're trying to incorporate a new technology such as a recommendation engine, there's challenges to creating and incorporating the AI responsibly. So the first piece is cultural. So shifting mindsets on the type of work that can be done and should be done. The next piece is organizational, aligning business and responsible AI objectives from the organization to make sure that they're aligned going forward. And then the next piece here is technical, building appropriate AI technologies. And that means that we have to really think through the technical pieces in terms of the data sets that we're going to use. Are they going to have any biases or unknown biases to us? And how much can we try and test and plan for so that we can again create these AI technologies in the best way possible. And something to keep in mind is that responsible AI is human-centered because AI systems are built on interfaces, models, data, and infrastructure. And all of these things are impacted by people and context. Any of these items, you need to understand the people, you need to understand the context so that you can understand what you're getting and then potentially what the AI system is going to produce from that. So 3 high-level principles for building AI in a responsible way. And these are things that can guide everything we do. And then we'll get into a little bit more detail around, some more tactical things, but just at a high level, 3 principles for building AI in a responsible way. When building, and I would also maybe add incorporating AI into your business processes. So the first one is connecting all technical decisions of the service back to user needs. The second would be involving diverse perspectives early and throughout the development. So really being able to see some of those potential points of failures because you have those diverse perspectives engaging during the development, not after. And then the third one is planning for failure so that users can recover when things go wrong. So, and expect that the algorithms, expect that the AI system will fail, and actually plan paths, plan experiences for the users so that they can recover when things go wrong. Now, here are some guidelines for human AI interaction. I did this, I've done work in this space for quite a few years, and maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I went to a workshop that was run by that was being led by someone from Microsoft. And they basically had done a bunch of research and they were releasing this toolkit. And I thought the toolkit was great. And I thought it captured a lot of things that I had learned, but it added to it. So now for the last couple of years, we've been using this as, for our clients as we go forward and we do work with them. So, and it really, the pieces here is that there's a framework for you to start to think through this stuff in a structured way. And a big part of it is that you need to think through 4 different phases of the human AI interaction. You need to think through initially what's going to happen. You need to think about during interaction, what's going to take place, when things go wrong, and then over time, how are things going to be improved. And if you can think through those 4 phases, organize, systematically, then you can actually create really great experiences that can be helpful for the business and for users. And within each of those 4 major buckets, you've got a bunch of different best practices and things that you can start to think about doing. You don't need to do all of them, but what you need to do is you need to think through each of these phases and decide, okay, what's relevant in this situation? What do I think would be helpful? So we're not going to go through all 18 of these, and there's never a need to build all 18 into your experience. It's just about thinking about what would be most relevant for the actual algorithm, AI system that you're actually starting to roll out. So this is the framework. This is a bit of the background. This really helps you to think through things. But what does that look like in real life? So let's go back to our telco example. The telco example, again, is a telco company incorporating a recommendation engine into the cell phone contract renewal flow. And this is an online experience. So we need to make clear what the system can do. So this is going to give them an offer. Okay, that's really important for people to understand. It's going to be a personalized offer. We should show contextually relevant information. So we know some information about that user from their history. We know about their, their columnists, we know about their data, we know about their text messages, we know about their roaming. So can we actually help them understand how the information that is going to be part of the recommendation, or how the actual recommendation is being built? So here we've got a visual where we start to say, hey, you know what, you've been going over regularly on your anytime minutes and your data. Your texting, your long distance is okay. And, something you might want to consider, bumping up for your next plan is your roaming. So these are all things that, we can provide to them so they can see and understand how this information is, or how the recommendation is being shaped, by giving them that contextually relevant information. And then the next piece here is that when we actually show them the offer, we want to make sure that they can, if it's not right, that they can quickly move on. So what we've done here is we, showed them the recommendation, but there's also there's 2 other offers that are also available for them to see right away. So one is something that's a little bit bigger, another one something that's a little smaller. So they can quickly just move forward if we've got it wrong, and they can keep going into the flow of the experience. And then the next piece is that we actually want to gather information. We want to actually get feedback to make things better. So we're collecting information from this page in a variety of ways. So A, based on what they click up above, and then B, if they want to adjust their personalized offer, they can tell us, what's more important for them, so that we can start to understand how the model went wrong. So these are things that we can do as we're building an experience that can be helpful. So again, we've taken that framework, we've thought through the different phases, right? Initially, during the interaction, when things go wrong, and over time. And now we've created a flow and experience that incorporates that recommendation engine and creates what we wanted, which was a better customer experience. So that's something that we could do. That was one example, but there's other examples, of where you're going to potentially want to incorporate technology into your business processes. So, another case example is a pharmaceutical company creating a voice-based virtual assistant to record notes from a sales meeting into a CRM tool. So again, we can use this framework to start to think through that, and how we can actually build that experience so that it's good for our sales team. Another example is a Fortune 100 bank infrastructure team creating an AI tool that will flag performance behavior that is unusual for a specific day. We need to think about that. We need to think about how are we going to present this information, when it's wrong, what type of information are we going to provide to help the decision maker to make the decision that's important. And this has a huge impact on the bank. So how can we think through that experience right now so that we can have good results going forward. So altogether, whenever we're trying to incorporate AI systems into our business processes or analytics into our business processes, we should really consider how they should behave upon initial interaction, during regular interactions, when they're inevitably wrong, because they will be wrong, and over time, how are we going to get the feedback to make things better? And keep in mind that the guidelines are not checklists. They need to be used during development to be used in the right way. So you really, during development means that you're working with developers, product managers, business, all the different stakeholders that would be important so that you can actually start to think through, okay, what is going to be relevant for us? What are going to be the important things for us to consider as we go forward? And then what we can do is we can build specs so that we can consider the best practices right from the beginning. Because if we don't, sometimes the specs for these things, like when we're building these algorithms or these AI systems, it will just be too rigid, and we won't be able to respond without a full-scale overhaul of the backend, which is costly. So you want to try to think about this in advance in terms of how you're going to incorporate it into the experience so that you can actually have the things you need in place so that you don't have to rebuild, so that you can create some of the things that would be helpful. So these are all things just to keep in mind. And then finally, I told you we've been using this toolkit, and it's available. It's open source. There's a lot there, so it's not easy to necessarily dive into to figure out how to use it. So I want to just show you, this in an overview. But if you want more thoughts in terms of how you could use it, or we can, help you in some way, by all means, reach out. But there's a few other things that are here that I just want to point out. So they've got the guidelines. They've got the workbook, they've got design patterns, so you can actually see some solutions that have been built in the past, and you can decide if maybe just using those patterns would be helpful for your organization. And then finally, there's a playbook. And the playbook is helpful for testing. And I think that that's one of the things that we've seen a lot of organizations struggle with in terms of just thinking through, how do we test these scenarios, and how do we, what are the best ways for us to really think through these tests for human AI interactions and their failures. So thank you very much. That is the end of the presentation or the webinar for today. That's my speaking part for the webinar for today. I'm happy to talk a little bit more. Again, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Impact Signal. And depending if we have any questions in the chat, we may stay around to try and answer a few of those questions at the end. Okay, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great day. And again, please reach out. Happy to be connected with you on LinkedIn, and happy to answer any questions if you have any questions.